Happy Sunday here in Virginia Beach. So on the way to Arizona, like I talked about in my last video. So we're no longer in New York, currently in Virginia Beach. I've been here since yesterday. I arrived like around 12 o'clock. Spent most of the afternoon and the evening down by the boardwalk, took some nice pictures, full of people playing volleyball. Oh, I should say sand soccer, I should say. Not some people playing volleyball. Really nice walking around. Got to do a little bit of shopping, but mostly here just to hang out on the beach before and relax before heading to my next contract out in Arizona. This particular video, we're covering demographic replacement. And so a lot of people are very familiar with the phrase, weak men create hard times create strong men create good times, etc. Right? Good times create weak men. It doesn't mean that the people stay the same. The demographics of those people stay the same. A perfect example is to look at what's going on in many places in Europe and in the UK, where they're forced to pull from the Middle East, right? Or from Africa, which is where most of them, every time I look online that someone's complaining about, robberies or rapes that are going on, stabbings, etc. And of course now if you look at downtown UK, many places in Europe, they have what they refer to as no-go zones. And in these areas where the men don't tolerate European culture, especially not for their women. So even though their women may like the freedom that many of the European women have, the men don't tolerate that sort of lifestyle for their women. And so you don't see like the military or the police willing really to go into those areas. A lot of times when you see all these videos of violence going on, it's like, oh, Allah Akbar, right? And of course it becomes a meme. Now, of course, these are the men that are going to replace you. And people are very uncomfortable with that. And it's just because they're not having children. So if you're not having children, or people are not having children, you're not replacing yourself. If you're not replacing yourself, then somebody else is going to replace you. And this is what a lot of people in Western culture, and this is why Western culture will not succeed long-term. Especially what we have today, especially the culture that we have today, will not succeed long-term. So a lot of these things are very self-correcting. You look at, the push for the global homo, and I refer to the global homogenization of people. They refer to it as a global homo in short. And basically what it means is we're all equal. That's not really the case. And you're seeing it with cultures, right? When cultures clash, a lot of times people don't get along. You see what's going on, for example, in California, right? Where they've got the whole pride thing going on, and you see a lot of Muslims and Armenian Christians just not willing to tolerate that. So what is it? It's a culture clash. Two different schools of thought, one pro-family, one not, right? And so what happens is, and I've said this many times, when logic and reason fail, right? When the parents go down there and they use logic and they use reason to say why they don't want their kids exposed to this stuff, the only thing that's left is force. And that's why you see the fathers going down there, and the fathers are fighting against, both with the police and of course with the Tifa people that come down there that show up all the time for these pride events. And you have to be willing to continue to escalate. And this is why American men are weak. They're not willing to fight for their children. And then overwhelmingly you see a lot of single males, a lot of white single males don't have families, basically don't have anything to fight for. Many not even looking to work. And so those men get replaced. Those men will be replaced by, like I said, 51% of all births in America are Latino. And you also don't see this stuff in Latin culture. You don't see this push for homosexuality, pride, and all this stuff. You really don't see it among Hispanics. You do see it among blacks, very prevalent among blacks. Some of the biggest places where you'll see large groups of homosexuals, which is typically in many black cities. Just look at the STD rates in those cities. I think there was a recent one that I saw the other day, Milwaukee. it was like 60% of all cases of HIV were among blacks, overwhelmingly, especially. By comparison with women, overwhelmingly, it doesn't even come close. Over 50% of all cases are among black women. Why? I did a video talking about this not too long ago. Most STDs, and it's not even close, are a result of homosexual activity. Over 90% of all syphilis cases, HIV, whatever it is, right? All these different diseases that are referred to that come from sex overwhelmingly come from male with male sex. And then, of course, in places like Atlanta and in Milwaukee, when you look at the demographics, for every one male that only sleeps with men, 2 out of 3 also sleep with women. And so when you have this high prevalence of homosexual, or what they refer to as down low activity, where these individuals then go out and sleep with the women, they then transmit HIV to those women. And that's why you see such a high prevalence of HIV among black women, because a lot of these women are sleeping with men that are either bisexual or on the down low, and not just straight gay men. You have, like I said, a very large prevalence of men that sleep with both and transmit diseases to their community. And so this results, unfortunately, in people being replaced. Your culture does not allow, and of course you have abortion very high among blacks. In fact, there isn't a child born in America that is least wanted than a black child by its own black community. And it's because most children, the black American black women, abort their children at a rate that is way higher than whites and whites and Latinos. And so the result is demographic replacement. Right? Just look at the black population not growing at all in America, not thriving, right? It's been the same or decreased in the last 100 years. You haven't seen any sort of growth within the community. Now, of course, you see that very similarly with white Americans. White Americans are also on the decline. Latinos are on the incline, right? We're on the increase. We're increasing in number. We have most of the births. So the future of America is Latino. And that's just a fact. Even if I talked about this on a video I did a while ago when Joe Biden, it was like right after his inauguration, and he met with the Black Caucus. And he straightforwardly told them, now that he was in power, they were talking about, we're going to defund the police. And he says, no, we're not going to do any of that. And they were looking at him like kind of shocked, like, this is what we voted for. And he's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. That would result in too many problems if we defund the police. We're going to refund the police. It was what he said. And then he said, he made a point where he said, in referring to black Americans, that black Americans are going to have to get used to working with Hispanics, and we're a very diverse culture, and we're very different. One of the reason that he said that was because he said white Europeans are on the decline, and Hispanics are going to be the future. This is straight out of Joe Biden. This happened right during his. You can probably look it up on YouTube. It was a Zoom meeting he did with the Black Caucus, and there's like 8 or 10 different people from the black community, and he was just basically giving them a heads up of what their future is. That's why he straightforwardly said, and you're going to have to learn to work with them, the same way how blacks have learned somewhat to work with white Americans. Basically, Joe Biden said that the switch is taking place where Hispanics will be the majority and whites and blacks will be in the minority groups, and they'll have to do things, in essence, our way. So there's a lot of change coming to America between now and, let's say, like 2050. There's going to be a lot of changes moving forward, and it's overwhelmingly related to culture. The culture that is either pushed upon you, or it's as a result of foolishly giving your women rights, especially voting rights. And of course, you don't see this in many Hispanic cultures. You don't really see it, and where you do see it, you see decline overwhelmingly. That's why in Middle Eastern culture, it's typically male dominated, and those are the ones who are going to come and take over your countries, because you foolishly chose to give your women rights and you refuse to fight for your country in terms of taking away these unnecessary rights that these people have, the constant voting for socialism, and of course the killing of your unborn. No nation will survive or thrive killing their unborn. The unborn are the future of your culture. And if you foolishly adopt this lifestyle of killing your unborn, you're basically opting for your own destruction. You're basically advocating for your own demographic replacement, and that's basically what happened and all across Europe. And it feels uncomfortable for a lot of these white people that are like, look what's going on, the culture clash, right? I mean, shoot, look at Sweden. Look at Sweden in terms of their sexual assault that's going on out there, from where it didn't exist to where it is now a culture where it's like the second leader among nations, second to Africa, ironically. And this is what you get. This is what you get when you won't fight for the people who are trying to replace you. It kind of is what it is. You basically not do anything. Just like Japan. Japan by 2050 will also disappear because they're also not replacing themselves, and somebody else is going to come onto that land and going to be like, hey, it's nice and empty here. Let's settle down. It is what it is. There's nothing these people want to do about it, except the only thing that they could do is take their women's rights away. When you take women's rights away and you go back to a patriarchal lifestyle, the people flourish. The people flourish. That's why America can pull, right, from the southern border, because out there is patriarchy. And I've talked about this on numerous videos, where you go to many of these Latin countries, the laws favor patriarchy. They favor people replacing, growing, having kids, family life, and Western culture is not conducive to that sort of a lifestyle. That's why I said don't bother having children or even attempting to have relationships in America, because the entire system is designed for it not to happen. Now, of course, if you have a large enough group, like for example, I talked about Pastor Dowell and his group, right? He's got a small group, and they practice patriarchy. You look at Hasidic Jews, they practice patriarchy. You look at the Mormons, or you look at any of these other religious groups, even though they're here, but they practice patriarchy, and they do it as a whole. The women who don't, you're welcome to leave. You don't see any of the pride and all that stuff. None of that stuff. You don't see any of it. Why? Because when push comes to shove, the men are willing to fight for their families. This is what you see with the Muslims. You see the same thing with the Christian Armenians. The men are willing to go out there and clash against the government. And when they make it too difficult, the government says, you know what, let's leave these people alone. That's why you look at places in Europe and even in America where they practice Sharia law. Shocking, right? You wouldn't even imagine that happening in places like in Europe and in France and in the UK. But what are they going to do? When push comes to shove, if they were to try to ban any of that stuff, they know that it's fuck around, find out time. And that's the problem with many white American men. The government knows, despite your 1776 come take it sort of mentality, they know when push comes to shove, you guys are pushovers. You're not going to do anything. A perfect example was the elections in 2020. There were plenty of people that realized that there was something going on. No one did anything about it. Borders wide open. Everybody talking about, we need to defend our borders. Ain't none of you men willing to go down there and do anything. Why? Because at the end of the day, the government knows that you're fearful, too afraid to push back. And so unfortunately, you're going to be replaced. It is what it is. The hard times create strong men. And so for a lot of you men, will be replaced. And hard times will come to America, and the men coming across the border are going to bring about the good times, so that some of you men can afford to live weak. It is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to enjoy my day here out in Virginia Beach, and then we'll be heading out to Arizona, probably come Tuesday. I'm currently scheduled to leave here Tuesday. It's a long drive, so we'll see if I spend another day here and then push the drive longer. We'll see because it's going to be about 4 days. Convenient if I do it nice and slow. It'll be about a 4-day drive out to Arizona. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll check you next time.